Horton versus California. This case is, once again, is still on the plain view doctrine. In the case, the defendant was convicted of armed robbery, and in the investigation of this robbery, the police obtained a search warrant to search the defendant's house. It is important for us to know the police officer wanted to search the house for the proceeds from the robbery. And the police also wanted to search for the weapons used in this armed robbery. But the judge, when the judge issued the search warrant, the judge only authorized the officer to search for proceeds. In the warrant, the judge did not authorize the search for the weapons. So the officer went to the defendant's house to conduct this search. While conducting the search, the police officer did not find any proceeds, but the police officer found weapons. So we know in the search warrant said the police could search only for proceeds, but while conducting the search, the officer did not find the proceeds, but the officer found the weapons. So the prosecution's argument was this discovery of the weapon should be justified under the plain view doctrine. And then, of course, the issue in the case was also whether this seizure of the weapons could be justified under the plain view doctrine. We need to discuss an earlier case to understand the issue in this case. We had an earlier case, that is Coolidge versus New Hampshire. And in this case, the court actually made three requirements for invoking the plain view doctrine. So the three requirements are this. The first one is the police are lawfully in a position to observe the item. The second one is the incriminating nature of the item is immediately apparent. By this requirement, we mean as soon as the police observe the item, the police have probable cause to believe the item is criminal evidence. That is what we mean by the incriminating nature of the item is immediately apparent. The third requirement is the discovery of the item is inadvertent. Meaning is, it should not be the police went over there to look for this particular item. The police actually just discovered this item just inadvertently. That is what we mean by this. The discovery of the item must be inadvertent. We need to discuss a little bit further about this inadvertent requirement. This requirement of inadvertent discovery was created to make sure that the police would not turn a specific search into a general search under the plain view doctrine. Because we discussed before, we should have no general search warrant. If the judge is going to issue a search warrant, the warrant must be specific, indicating what item the police are going to search while conducting this search. So our concern is now we have this plain view doctrine. We do not want police to turn this specific search warrant into a general search. Because if the warrant says the police can search for this for example, can search for this stolen bicycle, and then the police would go there, and then the police would search everywhere. The police would say, oh, this is a plain view doctrine, and then we find something, we can justify this discovery of this item under the plain view doctrine. So that is our concern. We don't want the police to use this plain view doctrine as an excuse to turn a specific search into a general general search. So we say if you want to invoke this plain view doctrine, this discovery of the item must be inadvertent. It cannot be you went over there, you already in mind, there is a different criminal evidence you want to find, and then you went over there, you conduct this search. You not only you're looking for this item listed in the warrant, you also look for whatever that is not listed in the warrant, but you also wanted to search. So that's why we said this discovery must be inadvertent. You cannot really beforehand, you already had an idea as to what item you want to search, and then you would go there to search for that item, even though that item is not listed in the search warrant. So that is the reason why we had this inadvertent discovery requirement. And then the issue in Horton was this. In Horton, the discovery of the weapons actually was not inadvertent. Why we know it was not inadvertent? Because we already said when the officer applied for the search warrant, the officer said, I want to search the house for the proceeds from the robbery, but because that was an armed robbery, we also want to search for the weapons. But the judge did not really write on the warrant the officer could search for both proceeds and weapons. The judge said, I'm going to write on the warrant, you can search for proceeds, but the judge did not write on the warrant the police officer could search for weapons. But while conducting the search, the officer was still thinking of finding these weapons. The officer actually testified in court, and then the officer was very honest, and he did say while he was conducting the search, even though the search warrant said he could only search for proceeds, but while conducting the search, he was also thinking of finding the weapons. So because of the officer's testimony, we know the discovery of the weapons was not inadvertent. So based on this, because of this discovery was not inadvertent, we know in this earlier case, this Coolidge versus New Hampshire, the court said we should have 3 requirements. The last one was this discovery must be inadvertent. So defense counsel just seized upon this point, and then the defense counsel said, the officer did not satisfy this inadvertent discovery requirement. So that's why this seizure of the weapons could not be justified under the plain view doctrine. And then it is important for us to look at this ruling of the court. The ruling of the court was the police were justified in seizing the weapons under the plain view doctrine. In other words, the court said this seizure of the weapons could be justified under the plain view doctrine. And then we would want to ask if the police did not satisfy one of the requirements, did not satisfy this inadvertent discovery requirement, why the court still held this seizure of the weapons could be justified under the plain view doctrine. The answer is this. The court in this Horton case abandoned this inadvertent discovery requirement. So the court said, we do not need this inadvertent discovery requirements, and then we are going to do away with this requirement. So because the court abandoned this inadvertent discovery requirement, so that's why the court ruled the seizure of the weapons could be justified under this plain view doctrine. The court actually further analyzed this issue. The court said even without this requirement of inadvertent discovery, there is already a mechanism over there to prevent the police from turning a specific search into a general search. and this mechanism is scope analysis. The court said we don't need this inadvertent discovery requirement to prevent the police from turning a specific search into a general search. The court said we can rely on this scope analysis. So let's look at this example, and then we know if this warrant authorizes to search for proceeds, and then the police may search anywhere they may find the proceeds. But we know the proceeds are very small. There may be jewelries and small coins. And then, so while conducting this search for the proceeds, if a police officer would open a closet, would open a drawer, and then they may find these weapons. In that way, the police actually are within the reasonable scope of the search. So if they actually found these weapons, of course, they can really seize these weapons under the plain view doctrine. However, if the warrant actually authorizes to search for weapons, and then the police may only search areas where they may find the weapons. So if they are authorized to search for weapons, and they certainly cannot open a small box where the weapons could not fit. If they open that small box, and then they went beyond the reasonable scope. So if they open the box, they found some proceeds, and then they could not legally seize these proceeds under the plain view doctrine, because that would be in violation of the requirement the police must be lawfully in a position to observe this item seized. So that is how we use this scope analysis to prevent the police from turning a specific search into a general search. And because the court said we have this mechanism already, it is unnecessary for us to also put in this inadvertent discovery requirement. The court said, actually, if you want to put in that requirement, that is really up to the police officer. In this case, the police officer was very honest, and he said, the discovery was not inadvertent. While I was looking for the proceeds, I was also looking for the, I was also thinking of finding the weapons. But just to think of it, if this police officer was not honest, if the police officer would insist, while I was looking for the proceeds, I did not thinking of looking for the weapons at all. And then if the police officer should so testify, and then the discovery would be inadvertent. But, but we know that is not really objective standard. And then maybe some police officers would testify honestly, maybe some police officer would not be that honest. And then the court said we cannot really rely on that. So it is a good idea we rely on an objective standard, that is scope analysis. We know scope analysis is an objective standard. Whether you want beyond the reasonable scope or you're within the reasonable scope, that is objective. Just like this discussion whether they can open a small box or not. But if the warrant said you could only search for weapons. So after this Horton versus U.S. and California, and then we no longer have this inadvertent discovery requirement. So after Horton, to invoke the plain view doctrine, the police only need to satisfy two requirements. One is the police are lawfully in a position to observe the item. The second one is the incriminating nature of the item is immediately apparent. That means they have a probable cause to believe the item they observed is a criminal evidence as soon as they see the item. So after this Horton versus California, it is very important for us to remember we only have two requirements. We no longer have this inadvertent discovery requirement.